Franchise Secrets, Eric Von Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a ZOR, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Your host, Eric Van Horn, here with today's guest, Ryan Zink. Ryan's been in franchising for over 20 years. He began his career managing 15 franchised general nutrition stores, GNCs, where he helped create the top 5 revenue producing GNC stores in the country. In 2005, he became the co-founder and president of Complete Nutrition. In 2015, he and his partner sold Complete Nutrition to a private equity group. And today, Ryan is the co-founder and CEO of Franchise Fastlane, the nation's largest franchise sales organization, awarding nearly 1,500 franchise licenses a year. Ryan is currently and has been a franchisee 20 plus times, a real estate investor, and a youth coach to his 4 boys. Ryan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Eric, good to be back. Always fun to be here with you.
Man, it's been fun. We got to know each other a number of years ago. I followed your journey as an FSO, and I've been getting a lot of comments in the Facebook group, and just some of my private clients that are franchisors are wanting to understand the world of the FSO. And I thought no better person to talk to about FSOs than, the largest FSO out there. And it hasn't even been that long, but you are, one of the foremost experts in franchising, franchisee, franchisor, and franchise sales organization. So we're going to be talking everything about FSOs. So why don't you start, give people a little bit about Franchise Fastlane, and then I want to really break down the definition of what is an FSO and what is their purpose for a franchisor.
You got it. Well, I'm glad that's the topic because that's something I know about. So Franchise Fastlane, you said it. We're a franchise sales organization. We like to help what we call the chosen few or the next big thing. So we help franchisors find franchisees, but not just any franchisor. We try to be really selective in those that we're going to represent. I like to tell people, imagine if you would have had early information on Jimmy John's, Orange Theory, Anytime Fitness, Massage Envy, and you could have became a franchisee early. What sort of opportunity would that have provided? That's what we're trying to do. We're talking to about 200 franchisors a year, and usually we'll add about 5 to 10 new franchise brands a year that we believe have what it takes to be that next big thing, that great opportunity for somebody to get in early. So we have 44 employees. We represent 18 brands. And like you mentioned, this year we'll award somewhere between 14 and 1,500 franchise locations.
So you didn't create the FSO model. You've perfected it. But what exactly is an FSO? If you came up to somebody on the street, they're like, they don't know anything about franchise sales. How would you explain what you do, what an FSO is?
Yeah, well, I definitely start with the quick, we help franchisors find franchisees, right? But to take that a little bit further, we're an extension of the brand. We have somebody or multiple people who understand that brand as well as their internal team. We spend many weeks of onboarding. We spend many weeks understanding and going and visiting the brand. We have many people on our team who have become franchisees. So we're an extension of that brand. And if we do our job well, a franchisor, they can focus on what they're good at, which is their business, dry cleaning, fitness, food, service, whatever it is. They became a franchisor, not because they were great at finding people to become franchisees, but because they were great at whatever their business is. So they get to go focus on that. We focus on finding candidates for them. And if we do our job well, they really only need to think about franchise development 2 days a month. And that's when we are on location for a confirmation day where they get to meet face-to-face and show off their brand. So we're an extension of the brand, helping franchisors find franchisees.
Here's what's interesting. When a franchisor gets their franchise disclosure document, they pay a lot of money to get that document.
Yeah.
And that's when the work begins. And they come to me and they're like, what do I do next? And they come to you and they're like, we need franchisees. And it's not easy to get franchisees, to sell franchisees. And so from your perspective, at what point should a franchisor be thinking about working with an FSO like yourself?
Yeah, well, and there's several types of FSOs. So to answer where they need to be to work with us versus maybe others is a different answer, right?
Yep.
But if they're considering working with us, number one, they have to have happy franchisees making money. That is, we're going to speak to all their franchisees when we consider onboarding a brand, and we're going to ask them, are you happy with the support you're getting from the home office? Would you decide to open this business again if you could rewind the clock? Do you like the ROI you're getting on the time invested into the business? And I think you got a list of 97 other questions to ask. So there's a heck of a lot of them out there, but we're going to talk to all of them. So that's number one. Second is we got to make sure that they're prepared for growth. So what does that mean? What type of leadership do they have? What kind of working capital do they have? Is their unique selling proposition strong enough to attract interest from candidates? When we do add the growth, do they have the ability to find the talent? Because many times they have, our favorite franchisors are those that already have the talent on the team, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they have a fantastic business, and if we're going to go add 50 locations, they're going to have to add some team members. So do they have the network to go add those individuals? There's other things we look for too, but really making sure your franchisees are happy and you're ready to scale with capital and people is the most important.
What's the small, like a franchisor with 10 locations? Would you consider that? Or do they have to have, 20, or is it less than 10?
We would consider 10, and even at times we've done less, but those are unique. Usually we look for quite a few more. The ones that have been less than 10 are those that we're like, wow, why didn't I think of that? The types of ideas you're like, this makes so much sense, has solid leadership. They've got experience in the business or other businesses for a while. So we've taken on a few that were less than 10, but traditionally, no, we're going to want probably 20, 25 or more.
So, I mean, you and I talk about this a lot. How does a brand go from 0 to 10 or 0 to 20? Because they're not going to use Fastlane to do that. There might be other FSOs out there, but that's a difficult position for a franchisor, because usually it's the franchise founder that is selling franchises. They have no experience selling franchises, and they're trying to find leads. They're trying to create this brand. They're trying to build the team, and yet they have 0 franchisees, or maybe they have some people that have said, I'm interested. So like, what advice would you give that person that has 0 franchisees? They want to get to 10 to 20. Their goal isn't to live in franchise development. It's either to hire an FSO or to bring on a full-time franchise development person. What would you tell that franchisor?
Yeah, I usually have 3 recommendations, and I'm going to rank them number 1 to number 3. So my top, this is my favorite, and not everybody's going to agree with this. Find people you know, whether it's friends or family, that's an option, or maybe more importantly, successful employees, right? People that have already been in your business. They understand how to operate successfully. You know them well. They know you well. Because let's face it, when you're opening your first few franchisees, you're not going to have a lot of support out there. So you need to have somebody that's going to know you enough to be patient with you and say, okay, I trust you and I think you're going to figure it out. Now, there's other challenges if they are friends or family members, and you need to know sometimes those are just the challenges you're going to have to overcome, because not many people want to be the very first few franchisees. When I was a franchisor, 2 of our first 3 franchisees were employees, and the other one was a friend, or a family member. So that's just what you got to do in the beginning. So that's what I think is number 1. You start there. Number 2 is you could enter a individual broker consulting group and really try to focus on just a few relationships there that you can build really deep and get them to trust you. You're not going to want to go to several broker groups or even try to communicate with dozens and dozens of consultants. You're going to go want to find a half dozen that you can build a relationship with that trusts you, and then say, okay, I'm going to leverage these 6 relationships to go find my first 5 to 10 franchisees. It's going to most likely be a little bit slow, and you're going to have to convince them that you're worth it. But that's the way. Number 2. Third, and you already said it, emerging franchisors don't want to live in development, but you wouldn't believe how many times we speak to an emerging franchisor and it's the founder or a senior leader that is trying to run development on top of whatever their other responsibility is in the organization. So if you happen to have the capital and the resources, this would be my 3rd option, because it's expensive. You could go team up with a marketing company, try to drive some outbound leads and bring them in and run them through a process. But again, you're going to have a pretty junior process, most likely being new. And so you're just going to have to really be willing to grind it out. But that would be my third choice.
Yeah. And I think, as a emerging brand that you have, less than 5 franchisees, you put yourself in your new franchisee's position. You think you have everything ready to go. You think you have this great brand and all these systems and processes, and you find out that it's not as great as you think when you are actually helping new franchisees get onboarded. And there is a lot of learning, and that new franchisee is taking on a lot of risk. On the flip side, you as a new franchisor, you're doing whatever it takes to help make them successful. So just recognize that they're taking a big risk on you as a new franchisor. But once you get things moving, then you have validation. You have franchisees that are telling others how they're happy or not happy they are, and hopefully they're happy because you are. How important are the first 10 franchisees? Because I was about ready to go there, but how important are the first 10 franchisees in any franchise system?
Well, it's such a rock and a hard place because they're your most important. Yet at the same time, it's really difficult to get quality individuals in because you don't have a track record, right? So what a double standard there. And that's why you just said it. It is going to have to be that founder, that first leadership team, really willing to roll up their sleeves, get on the road, do everything they can to support those first few franchisees. Because the truth is, no matter how well you document it in the beginning, there's going to be things that franchisees need that are not in the documents, or they don't want to turn to a video or a document to understand it. They want to speak to somebody that's done it before. So they're so very important. You may not get all A+ franchisees in the beginning. So how do you overcome that? You overcome that with a lot of hard work in the beginning, a lot of over communicating and being available.
I love it. I love it. So let's say there's a brand, they're at the point, or they will be at the point where they have 10, 20 franchisees, and they are at this crossroads. Let's say it's the founder that has been selling, and now they don't have the time to continue to sell. And they either need to hire a franchise salesperson or hire an FSO. What are the options in your mind with that? Like, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each? And we can just have some conversation around this.
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer. If your brand is ready for growth, outsource it. Now, not every brand needs to. There's a couple of brands that they're onto something hot and people want to be a part of it. And in that case, I'd say don't go get an FSO. If you're an Orange Theory or a Jimmy John's, you don't need an FSO. Don't go use them. You're just giving up things that you don't need to. But for the rest, the 99% of the rest of us, I do think outsourcing the things that are not core to your business is very important. You can't be great at a lot of things. You need to be a sniper rifle, not a shotgun, right? So go be really good at what your business is, and then outsource the rest. And that's where I think FSOs can be so valuable, because what we're great at, our sniper rifle is we go out and we find quality candidates, we educate them, we hold them accountable, we bring them all the way through the process and make sure they're prepared to become a franchisee before they get any of your time. And you just can't do that if you're trying to manage it internally without one of those really great brands, because the numbers are against you, right? We all know there's somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 franchisors actively seeking franchisees. It's very expensive to get a lead. And then when a lead comes in, we know somewhere between 60 and 80% of them never even get contacted, not through an email, not through an automated message, not through a phone call or text message. And why is that? Because if you drill all the way down to the bottom of the funnel, we know less than 0.5% of the people that reach out to you are actually going to become a franchisee. So it's intimidating and overwhelming for whomever is in that development team, or that 1-person or 2-person development team, to say, I have a lot of things that I can do in my day. And when you weigh it against reaching out to that new lead who's got, 1 out of 200 of them are actually going to become a franchisee, what typically happens is people default to their day-to-day activities, and they don't put a lot of emphasis on the front end of immediately reaching out. And then that's why we see through Fran Connect that 60 to 80% of new leads never even get contacted. You're out there spending money on a budget to drive leads, and then you don't follow up with 6 or 8 out of 10, which is just crazy. So how does that come back to your question? That's why you go find an expert. When we represent a brand, or any FSO hopefully represents a brand, they're going to have a process in place to be sure 100% of the leads are contacted, and not just contacted, but timely. They're contacted quickly. Usually it's going to get a voicemail or no response to a text message or an email. So it requires then a system behind that for continual follow-up. So I think I answered your question, but it's really to make sure that you're working with somebody who is an expert at finding the candidate, qualifying the candidate, and then bringing them through the process and making sure they're ready to buy.
And it's going to cost some money. no matter what direction you go, if you hire an experienced franchise development person, they're going to cost some money. Or if you hire an FSO, it's going to cost some money. I think the most expensive route to go is hiring an inexperienced franchise development person that doesn't have a clue what they're doing, and they might be doing stuff wrong from a legal standpoint that can get you in trouble, and they just don't know how to work with buyers and take them through an effective franchise development process to help the buyers identify themselves and make sure that those buyers are the right franchisees for you and your brand. So that's the most expensive. But the first two options, FSO and Fran Dev Rep, are very expensive as well. And that's just part of it. That's part of being a franchisor. And that's, so I was going to go down a rabbit hole of that's why franchise fees are what they are. But what's a cost? Like, first of all, I want to get into some costs of what someone might expect if they hire an experienced franchise development person. But before we get to that, give us a range of franchise sales organizations out there. There are some that are low touch, low cost, and some that are high touch, high cost. Some have required the brand to give them equity. Some don't have equity requirements. So can you give me a range of what you see of what these different FSOs are like?
Yeah, well, so let's break that into categories. We'll break it into service and we'll break it into cost. So from a service perspective, it's across the board. You can find an organization that will just help you set up the materials and train your team, right? I don't even know if I would qualify that as an FSO. That's more of a consultant because they're not going to actually go do the selling for you. But that's on the very front end, probably the least expensive. And then you can try to manage that with your internal team. You take a step up, you're going to find organizations that are going to do pretty much all the sales for you. And I say pretty much, use us as an example. We still need leadership to participate on a leadership call, usually once a week, and then confirmation day, which happens once a month, right? But besides that, we're going to do everything in that discovery or sales process. And there's several others out there that focus specifically on that discovery process. Then there's others that might even take it a step further that are going to do sales, and they're going to start supporting operations. So they'll get into training, they'll get into day-to-day operations and continual support of franchisees. Now, again, I am a big believer in focus. And so that's why we do what we want to be the best in the world at that development process. I don't believe Fastlane would be where it is today if we were trying to be the best in the world at both development and operations. Now that we're really nailing, in my opinion, what's going on in the development piece, we may eventually someday move over to ops, but that's only going to happen once we feel that we're really, really good, or the best in the world, as we like to say it, at this piece. So that's kind of how I would stagger it. You have your very front end training and development of materials. You have your organizations that are going to focus specifically on sales. And then you have the organizations that will do both sales, operations, things of that nature. So then when you get into cost, again, it's going to stagger just according to those three. The least expensive is going to be those organizations that are just training and building materials. For us, we are very much like a real estate agent, right? We have a pretty low monthly retainer that's going to get staff. It's going to get all the technology needed, even marketing, and it's pretty inexpensive. We spend quite a bit more than what we charge in a retainer. But where we make our money is like a real estate agent. When we award a franchise location, that person pays a franchise fee, and then we take a percentage of that. And it's going to be a different percentage based on if it's a lead that we drive, if it's an organic lead, or if it's a broker lead, right? We want to make sure the franchisor still has enough meat on the bone to afford the franchise development piece of it. Then if you take it to the next level, well, actually, I want to caveat this next piece. So the organizations that do both sales and operations, they're usually going to require equity, royalties, something of that nature. And so then that franchisor really just needs to evaluate and say, do I have the ability to build this internal team myself? Do I have the people? Do I have the understanding and the experience? And can an outside operational group know and support my franchisees as well as my own internal people could? In some cases, the answer may be yes. You're going to then trade equity and royalties. And so I would just encourage people to really think through what their exit strategy is, how much growth they think they have in front of them, and what it's worth. Now, where I think franchisors should avoid is those groups that are doing sales only and then requiring equity and royalties, right? I really believe that, and this is just one person's opinion, not everybody's going to agree with me, but the sales process, the team that helps the sales should be commissioned on the franchise fee and not through royalties and equity unless they're providing ongoing value, because that franchisor is now responsible. That franchisor is responsible for operations, training for potentially the next 10 years or more with that franchisee. And I just think it's going to be an expensive process for them. It's going to be a lot of hard work for them to do that. And so they should reap the rewards.
What is the argument that an FSO would have of why they do get equity? What's their argument? Say, gosh, we get equity because of what?
There's going to be two. One, if they're providing operational support, it's because we're offsetting your expense and we're going to create value, right? And that's the way that I think it probably makes sense if you're giving up equity. And then the other is just if a sales organization says we're going to take equity, it's going to be because we are going to award many more locations than you most likely could on your own, leveraging our process, leveraging our marketing, understanding our branding, and it's going to create a tremendous amount of value. And trust me, I think about that. I mean, we've had 4 brands sell to private equity groups over the last 18 months. Now, if they were with another organization and they had equity involved, that would have been quite a bit. So it's a fair argument when somebody says we're going to create a tremendous amount of growth for you, and that might be worth something.
Did you have a little bit of regret when you saw some of these brands exit for many zeros that you didn't have a piece of that? You've had a big exit. You've had a great big exit already, but no regret?
Well, not regret. Regret's the wrong word. I feel pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered, and we are doing just fine. The thing I like is the way we set ours up today is it's a win for everybody. It's a win for us. It's a win for the franchisor. It's a win for the franchisee. And so it just doesn't end in hurt feelings. It really is a great model for everybody. And so I don't have any regret. I think there's several brands that we've been able to represent because we don't require those things that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise.
Yep. That's a great point. That's a fantastic point. Well, that leads into why give up most of your franchise fee to go into the broker networks and to have an FSO like Fastlane, especially Fastlane, work with your candidates within a broker network versus you just going in alone. I mean, in my mind, this is where there's so much value. But let's talk about broker networks a little bit, and then let's talk about FSOs working within broker networks.
Yeah, and I want to come back to your question too of, where's the value? What value does it create? Why would you do it? But broker groups, consultant groups, broker groups, coaching groups, they have several names. We love them. We spend a lot of time, money, and attention making sure that they're very aware of our brands. And these are fantastic people, most of them anyway. You always have, in any organization, you always have few that are the cream of the crop and others that are still learning. But we have fantastic relationships with 6 or 7 various broker groups. And when we go in, they know that we're going to bring them a brand that we vetted. We've only bring them something that we consider to be the next big thing. And so they give us a lot of attention. I believe that we do more deals inside of the broker groups than any other FSO right now. And it's because they trust us. They trust that we're bringing them good brands. They trust that when they place a franchise client of theirs in one of our brands, they have a better opportunity at success, which is going to turn into possible referrals or repeat buyers. And so we find just a ton of value in that. And for us in the beginning, we're 5 years old. In the beginning, it was necessary for us. It was because we didn't understand lead generation well enough. Now we're getting pretty good at it today, but it took us a while. And so we were willing to go in and pay the cost of the broker groups because they cut out the front end, which is the lead generation, which in many times is the hardest part, not just lead generation, but also lead qualification. The really good brokers out there are going and running these people through a process to understand that they're qualified. And so if you are a franchisor or an FSO that isn't fantastic yet at the front end lead gen, I'd encourage you to try to create relationships there, but then also know that you're going to have to bring your A game because there's a ton of brands in there trying to get attention. And so that's a whole nother strategy around how do you go get attention there.
Well, I think that's a great point. Some of my private clients are brands that are, getting ready to work with an FSO. They're getting ready to work with Fastlane. I help them get to that point where Fastlane wants to work with them and they're ready if they're a brand that Fastlane wants to take on. But I have conversations with a lot of different brands, and they are so enamored with the broker world. They're like, if I can get into the broker world, I'm okay paying a lot of money to them for the leads. But I've seen it over and over as a broker consultant for years. a new brand comes in doesn't mean that they're all of a sudden going to get a bunch of leads, attraction, and sell a bunch of franchises and bring in the right franchisees. I mean, that doesn't even happen. There's things that have to happen in order for a brand to get traction, to get on a run, to do really well in the broker community. Working with Fastlane, where there's proven development reps that are working with the brand, that they have a process to work with the broker networks. They have relationship with the brokers within the broker networks. They have discovery days that are very consistent, and it's a process that brokers are used to. All of those things make it magic for Fastlane to go in to represent a brand. And brands should have an expectation if they sign with Fastlane that get ready, because franchisees are going to be coming in pretty soon and pretty fast and furious. But it's because of all that. What else would you add to that? Because Ryan, I mean, it's incredibly important to have everything has to be firing on all cylinders for them to have a lot of really good traction with the broker networks, right?
Yeah, of course. I think people look at it. So you say a lot of folks are talking to you about they really desire to get in there, and they think it's going to be some sort of magic process that's going to work. And really, if you boil that down to what the psychology of it is, this is going to be easier, right? That's what people are thinking, and I'm willing to pay more if it's going to be easier, which I understand. But the thing I would encourage everybody to think about is, what is the lost opportunity cost if it doesn't succeed? Because here's what happens. We all know this. Every brand is going to have a reputation inside of the broker groups. And if you enter and they've sent you leads, and those leads don't enjoy the process, they don't get educated, they don't end up becoming franchisees, very quickly, all of the consultants, the brokers, they're going to start talking about it. They're going to look at the numbers they do regularly. They're going to talk about it, and they're going to say that brand is not ready. So what happens is you might get a little bit of, when I don't know if it's early or you got to go build reputations to get it, but when you finally start to get leads, if you're not converting people into franchisees, that's going to get talked about, and you're now going to lose those leads. So how hard is it now that you've created a reputation of not being prepared to dig yourself out of that hole to go get the momentum that you initially desired? So like many things in life, don't enter a broker group early. Enter it once you feel very confident and you've proven your process is exciting for a candidate. Otherwise, it's going to do more harm than good.
That's a great point. And I was on two private client calls yesterday, and really consulting calls. And they were saying, I want to get in the broker network, and I want to get in the broker networks. How do I get in the broker networks? And how do I get more leads? And I was pushing back. I'm like, you don't have a lead problem. You probably do have a lead problem, but even more than that, you have a franchise development problem. You have no process. You have no systems. You have nobody that really is excelling in taking a lead and taking them through an entire process that results in a new franchisee. And so you can really, once you ruin a reputation in the broker networks, good luck going back. There's just a graveyard of brands that don't have a reputation for a variety of reasons. So make sure you're really ready to go in. What would some of those warning signs be that you're not ready to go into the broker networks? And we've already given some of them, but anything else that you would add to that?
Yeah, first look at your process. I mean, it's not difficult to find out the process that some of the best organizations use. So figure out a way to get your hands on it. You could probably call Eric Van Horn and figure that out pretty quickly. And just look at your own internal process and say, how do we measure up? I hate to say it, but Franchise Fastlane and other FSOs are making it difficult for an individual franchisor to come in and look good, because just today alone, we'll spend hundreds of hours on the phone with franchise clients. We have something like 1,100 consultant leads in our process today. So think of how many times we are getting to practice, execute the funnel, improve it. We constantly talk about improving it. We have somebody here that does nothing but goes around and looks at the funnel, makes sure that it's optimized, and then trains people on how to make it better, right? And so when a broker gets that type of or a client and a broker get that type of experience, that now becomes the expectation. So if you're an individual franchisor coming in and your process isn't impressive and doesn't get people through it, again, the brand is going to quickly get a reputation of not being good enough or being mediocre. So I think you just need to kind of take a real hard look at your own process, not through your own it's my baby, so it's cute kind of eyes, but instead of what's the real world application of what I have here and is it going to stack up? And don't feel hurried. I speak to so many franchisors that they're in a big rush. They think if they're not first to market with their idea or whatever, it's just going to ruin everything. And that's not the case. I mean, we've seen it over and over again that usually first to market is going to be the one out there and just shows you how to avoid all the mistakes. So don't be in a big hurry until you're really ready, and speak to somebody like us or somebody like you to go through your system and your brand to tell you if you're ready.
Yep. Great point. So a lot of, again, talking to private clients and emerging franchisors, they are wanting to build a brand to sell it. I was on the phone with somebody that has a very well-known brand, celebrities. A brand is a mom and pop. A very well-known brand is a mom and pop. Celebrities wanting to buy it. And I was on the phone with them yesterday, and the goal was to sell it to private equity in 5 years. And it's retail. So you get a franchisee signed on, it's going to take a year before they're open. Wanting to sell to private equity in a year, I'm like, that's going to be very difficult. And they wanted to do it in-house without an experienced team. And I'm like, you're probably not going to be at the point where you're selling to private equity. But let's say, like you said, you've had the brands that you've repped you've had 3 exits in the last 18 months. So this is, in reality, whether new franchisees like it or not, a lot of the emerging brands are building it to sell. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just the evolution of franchises. And what's cool about it, though, is there are private equity brands that they have a specific criteria of what they want in a portfolio of franchise brands. So their goal isn't just to spend a bunch of money to acquire a brand. Their goal is to make it better. So in the world of private equity, emerging brands, Fastlane's right in the middle of it, because I know private equity loves you guys and they want you guys involved, but give us kind of the state of emerging brands and private equity and what you're seeing out there.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I believe private equity is the best course for most emerging brands once they hit a certain point, right? I was a founder myself. I started in the store working with customers, understanding what that was like, eventually became a manager and then a franchisor, and it worked really well for a while. But once you hit a certain level, you're in uncharted waters. You're in an area that you don't have leadership experience, you don't have resources, and sometimes you don't have capital to take it from here to there. And you just hit it on the head. These private equity groups, they don't come in to spend a lot of money to buy a brand unless they have really great plans for how to make it even better. And there's many franchise brands out there that have become so much better once private equity has become involved. In fact, as long as it depends on the private equity group. It's just like anything else in life. The people behind the group and their initiatives matter. But many times when our brands do partner, it's usually not an outright sale. It's usually a partner with a private equity group. We get pretty excited because we've just brought in new capital. We've just brought in a desire to grow. We've just brought in experience and resources. And honestly, many times they own other brands. And when they see how we've done, we're going through it with several brands right now. When they've seen how we've done on these other brands, they say, hey, we have 3 or 4 other brands right here that we'd like to talk to you about representing as well. So it's great not only for us, but it's great for that franchisee. And many times because the brand now has maybe outstretched the capabilities of that initial founding team, and they're better suited on a board, reminding everybody about the initial heart and the initial culture of the brand and what got them there, but maybe handing over the management of the day-to-day to the people that have done it before.
So as a founder has a brand, they engage with Fastlane, or they are getting ready to sell in the next, let's call it 3 years. Candidates, people that are looking at buying that brand, when the question comes up, are you just going to sell this in 3 years? Like, what should be going through a candidate's mind at that point? And how does a founder respond to that?
I think the right question is, what are your plans to keep up with the growth of the brand in 3 years? And private equity might be part of that plan. And I think too often people look at it as a negative thing. And remember, this is so important. It's usually not an outright sale. It is a partnership where the heart and the culture of the brand is the responsibility of the founder. So he or she is going to sit on that board, possibly on the executive team somewhere, and say, the reason we are here today is because of XYZ. Don't forget that. Right? As long as the heart and the relationships and the culture of that that franchise is maintained, you absolutely want those additional resources. So I think you just need to understand what their plan is to grow beyond their capability. And if it's private equity, what kind of people they want to partner with and how they want to be involved.
I want to pin you down on a price, if I could, not for an FSO, but give us a range of a brand that wants to hire a good, not the best, but a really good franchise development person that takes the first call to closing. You know, what would that price be for somebody like that? And how many deals would that person want or need a year for them to want to work for an emerging brand?
Wow, great question. So this is going to be general numbers, right? I mean, we can always get a pen and paper out and really.
And we can be super general too, Ryan. Yeah, because I mean, there's such a wide range, but this is a question. I think if we can have a conversation around this, it's going to help these new brands figure it out, because a lot of times they have sticker shock on the kind of amount of money that some of these development reps make.
Yeah, so we actually have this in our presentation for a franchisor. We want them to understand the opportunity, the cost of doing it themselves versus the cost of doing it with us. And we spoke to a recruiting firm in franchising. And remember, some of this is going to be commission. And so take this with a little bit of grain of salt, but really great franchise development people on the very low end are going to be about $150,000. On the high end, I would tell you 400,000 or more, depending on how many units they can go out and award. And again, that sticker shock kicks in like, really, why do these people make so much? Well, it's because of what we've been talking about. They have the relationships, they know the brokers, they know the people, they know how to market, and they understand the process. So that first off is going to be a very expensive employee for you. Now, one thing I'd say, Eric, you said all the way from the first call to the last, I would tell a franchisor that's a big mistake.
I agree with you, and I want you to get into this, but the old school way of doing it is taking them, or at least in my experience, the old school way of doing it is taking them through the entire process. But yeah, so this is a good conversation. So please go ahead.
It goes back to specialty. You know, what can you be great at? And do you want your most expensive person? Let's say you're driving, several hundred leads a month. Do you want your most expensive person making those phone calls, those text messages, which I think we have about a 17% contact rate or something like that, right? And so they're going to make 100 phone calls. 83 of them are not going to pick up. They're going to speak to 17, trying to spend time qualifying them, understanding the things, just to then get them into the process so they can educate them on the brand. What we are believers in is specialty at each phase. This is a little bit corny and people roll their eyes at me, but I like to say 100 years ago, you had to plant the field, harvest the corn, dry it out, bring it to your table, and then cook it and eat it, right? Well, today we can just walk into a grocery store. Why is that? Because there's people that specialize in each part of the process that make it a better process. So what we do is we have lead qualifiers on the front end. Our marketing team's responsible for the top of the funnel to drive the leads. Our lead qualifiers then have requirements around how quickly they're required to reach out via text message, phone, and email. And then we have numbers that we try to achieve on how many of those are qualified, and then they enter the process with a franchise director. Now, what happens when that person finally reaches a franchise director? They feel honored a little bit to be there. They feel like they're now on a pedestal or they're into something that's important. Whereas if the director was the person that called them on the first call, it just feels like, oh, okay, this is Joe calling me again. We're going to have a second phone call. We really like kind of having checkpoints throughout the process where it feels like, okay, we've made it this far. Let's evaluate where we've been. Let's make sure that we're ready for the next phase and go. I mean, we even do it to when somebody gets invited to a confirmation day with us, it gets handed off from the director to the vice president. So it even goes up another level. I'm a big believer in not burning people out, trying to do everything. And instead, again, you got to be able to afford it, but instead having specialty at each level of the process.
And this is where, if you're thinking, how can I afford this? The opportunity cost is the bigger question. Like, what am I missing out on because I'm not putting the money into this? If you have a franchise and you've spent the money to become a franchisor, this is a really good place to put your money, but you have to be doing things the right way. And, in my experience where I've done it all in the past, it was quite a few years ago, but I took a brand from zero to a lot and I did it with just me. And we were on the stage at the franchise shows for selling, a lot of the franchises, but I was doing it from the first call to the wiring of funds. And there's a big burnout that happens in that process. And then you're dealing with the person that you're having that first call with, and you're trying to close the person that has already been to a meet the team day, a confirmation day, a discovery day. And what happens is you start to lose, if they're not moving forward quickly after discovery day, you're back onto the first calls and second calls. And that's where you're devoting your attention, and you're missing out on closing deals, bringing on the right franchisees, because you're trying to do too many things. You're being the jack of all trades and master of none. So I like how you've kind of specialized that. Especially, what advice would you give to a new franchisor that is answering the phone? They're doing that first phone call themselves to set up the first appointment. What would you say to them?
Setting up the first appointment. Well, speed. People will talk all the time about speed to lead, right?
Yep.
And so that is important. I'm gonna use a Ted Lasso quote. I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso.
I have. I've seen it all. I'm ready for season 3 next, right?
Yeah. Be curious, not judgmental. And here's what I mean. Usually when people don't move through our process, we think it's something wrong with them. Why are they not moving through? They were tire kickers. They're not serious. They're just, they're out there doing research. They really don't want to do it. But instead, maybe have a process to, we reach out to every candidate that has exited our process, and we ask them for feedback. Instead, reach out and say, why didn't you go through the process? Tell me more. And you're only going to get 10% of them to actually answer it, but that 10% is gold. They're going to say, you misled me on what it costs to open, or I didn't understand this about the business and I don't like that part. Because if you can better understand why somebody drops out, then you can push that messaging all the way to the front end and say, hey, I want you to know this part about our brand. You're going to have to work it yourself for the first year. Or, you know what, you're not going to be able to get financing for it because we don't have enough employees. Whatever that is, let them know right away. And so everybody is on the same page. So be curious, not judgmental.
What are some of the things that you've learned through that process? Some of the, or the team has learned by doing that follow-up, getting feedback. Anything else that you would look back on, be like, wow, I didn't see this coming, but we really did change our process because of some feedback that we had?
Yeah, actually for me, I probably take it a little bit of a different direction. I often think about our team and the psychology of what they do every day. And so I think about the burnout that can happen in qualifying calls or speaking to candidates. If you have a brand that is not attractive to a franchisee, you burn out really quickly. You find out that you're having phone calls with people that don't move forward, and you just feel like you're beating your head against the wall. And so I really try to, again, make people really specialized so they get really good at it. And then we look at the numbers, and it's an unfortunate thing. We haven't had to do it many times, but if we don't feel like we have a brand that's going to continually motivate people, we may consider different options for them. And that's, it's obviously nice for our business, because then it allows us to bring in a new franchise brand and try again. And again, we don't have to do that often, but I would really encourage franchisors that just say, hey, they're going to put one person in there and that person's going to figure it out. Please make sure that you have as many automations as you can. Your marketing is spot on. Your messaging is good, because if you're just reliant on that person rolling up their sleeves and putting in that effort, they'll do it for a while, but after a period of time, they're going to burn out, and then you're back to it at square one.
I asked in the Facebook group, Franchise Secrets Facebook group, some questions. I said, do you have any, I told them that I was talking to you today, talking about FSOs, and Lorenza had a question. We kind of talked about it, but I want to go into it a little bit deeper. When is the best time for a franchisor to sign with an FSO? So we talked about that a little bit in the beginning, but now we've done a lot of education on what an FSO is. And so we'll kind of come full circle back to that one. Like, what would you, the brands that you've signed that have done the best with you, which probably means they've had an exit or they're looking to have an exit, at what stage or different stages did those brands come to you and sign with you?
Yeah. Well, I think the best time to come to us is when you have very happy franchisees, and you have something that, and you have something can grow, and you have the resources to do it, right? So those three things: very happy franchisees, a brand that can work anywhere in the country, and you have the resources to do it. And by resources, I mean to support the new growth. We can handle the development side. You don't need those resources, but to support the growth. Now, we've had several call us just when they were tired of franchise development. They were burned out of all those phone calls, and they realized it was usually not the best use of their time. It's a necessary evil at times for the first 10 or 20 franchisees, because if you can't afford somebody, you got no choice but to do it yourself, but they're tired, they're onto something, and they're like, I think I can take this to the next level with a professional organization. Now that's less likely. We like the ones more that are just like, okay, we know we're ready to go, let's do it. The ones that say, I'm tired, can you look at this and say, is it ready to grow? We're happy to do that. And if it is, then that could be a good time as well. But I would prefer that they were really happy franchisees, resources, and a brand that they know could work anywhere in the country.
Oh, I completely agree with that. One last question, and then we will close things out shortly. What is the difference between a good franchise development rep and a great one? Like the best of the best and a good one. What's the difference?
We call it the 2 I's. They are intentional and they are influential. And let me explain why those both are important. So I'm going to start with influential. People enter your process because they have a problem. They have a challenge in their life. They want to make more money. They want to create wealth. They want to do something with their kids. They want to leave their job. They want supplemental income. Whatever it is, there's a reason that they clicked for more information. Now, what happens as they get deeper and deeper in the process, they have to get funding, they have to get legal reviews, they got to talk to their family about it. All these hurdles are in the way, fear creeps in, and many of them want to exit. So it takes somebody that's very influential to remind them, Eric, the reason you entered this process in the first place is because you said you wanted to be able to send your kids to college, or because you don't want to work 60 hours a week in that cubicle anymore. Whatever it is, remind them what it is, make sure that they're feeling confident, they're speaking to franchisees, and just continue to be influential throughout that process. The second, intentional. If we are not intentional with people looking at a franchise brand, it'll slip. If we let people go at their own pace, if we let them kind of dictate the way it's going to be, or if we're not providing information to them when we say that we're going to, they're going to look at that and say it's a representation of the brand. So you have to be extremely intentional in what's going to happen in the process, when it should happen, what you're going to do, what the expectation is of them, and then don't miss any of those. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. No surprises. So intentional and influential is what we look for.
So let's say there's a brand that is ready. They have happy franchisees. They're ready to scale from a resource standpoint, and they want to look at engaging with Franchise Fastlane. How do they reach you, and what can they expect in terms of a call with you or your wonderful business partner, Carrie?
Yeah. Well, Carrie's the best in the business. I mean, she knows franchising inside and out, and she won't pull any punches. So people will know really quickly if she thinks it's a good brand or not, or good's the wrong word, one that will work for us. But what you do is you go to franchisefastlane.com, and right there, schedule an appointment. We have that button right there on the website. You only have to put in a minimal number of information, your email, your phone number, and your name. We will have somebody on our team reach out to you very quickly. And then they'll have just a quick little questionnaire. It's 5 to 7 questions, a little bit about your goals, about your brand. It'll only take you a couple of minutes to fill it out. And then that person will evaluate the answers. And if they look like it'll meet the criteria, she'll schedule a 20 to 30 minute call with Carrie. Carrie will then hop on the phone, understand the brand in those 20 to 30 minutes. And if it feels, again, that it's going to be the next big thing, because that's what we're looking for, that's when we really start to get into it. So the next phone call is 90 minutes where we walk them through an entire presentation of how it works, what it costs, what we do, what's their responsibility, what to expect. We get into budgets, we get into plans. And then if it still feels like it's going to work, it takes us about 6 to 8 weeks to go through the whole process of understanding the brand, building the onboarding materials. But it's a really slick process. It's one that we try to make as easy as possible on the franchisor. And like you said, I mean, we're really proud of the brand we've built, because the franchise brands that join, they usually see some pretty phenomenal growth and life-changing opportunities.
Well, one of the things I appreciate about you and Carrie is that you are very upfront, very honest with the 200 plus brands that you speak with, because I get to speak with some of those every now and then, because franchising is a pretty small world, and they always have great things to say about you. And I just let them know that I can trust that if you spoke with Ryan, you spoke with Carrie, that you're getting honest feedback, and they can take that and do something with it, and maybe eventually come back and be one of your clients if they're not accepted at the first time. One last thing too, one of the brands that I'm currently working with as a private client advisor with equity is looking at becoming a client of Fastlane. And so, I put my money where my mouth is. There's a lot of reasons to use an FSO. There's so many different reasons out there. I encourage you, if you are thinking about working with an FSO, give Franchise Fastlane a call. Ryan, it's always a pleasure, my friend.
Really enjoyed it, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.